this whole thing around relationships have to have kind of the sex and the passion die out. Well, that's really is a myth. Like they will likely have that happen
Mm.
if we do not intercede, if we do not say, hey, we're putting active energy into keeping this hot, keeping this passion, keeping this alive. So it does require intention and some effort, but it's not by any means like it doesn't have to like be this way just
Mhm.
because we're together for a long time.
I'm Rachel, and you're listening to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. Hello, everyone. We have on a very special guest today. We have on Dr. Diane, and I'm so excited to be connecting with her today around just so many things. We're talking about how to bring novelty back into long-term monogamous relationships. And so, a little bit about Diane. She is a seasoned sexual wellness authority, blending a strong educational foundation with a rich clinical and teaching experience. She has a dual doctorate in naturopathic medicine and acupuncture and oriental medicine. And Diane has illuminated the discourse on sexual health through her practice, My Libido Doc. And her personal journey through sexual health challenges has equipped her with a unique empathic lens, enriching her holistic approach to patient care. And Diane extends her expertise through the Libido Lounge podcast, her online training institute, and by training medical professionals worldwide in functional medicine. So her proactive community engagements, including co-hosting sexual health events and participating in numerous summits, and reflect her commitment to fostering a well-informed sexual wellness dialogue. At the heart of her practice lies the belief that a healthy libido is a cornerstone to holistic wellness, driving a practice that has orchestrated transformative health journeys for her clients. So I'm really excited to have Diane onto the show today. And again, we're bringing novelty back into monogamy. And so the loss of passion and desire in long-term monogamy and what to do about it. And we're also going to tap into a little bit of what causes low sex drive in both women and men, whether that be physical, personal, and interpersonal reasoning. And so without further ado, we'll have Diane jump into this episode with me. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. All right, welcome, Diane. Thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Thank you, Rachel. It's great to be here.
Yes, yes. And we were just talking about your cool sign that you have in the background. So if you're not watching on YouTube and you want to pop over there so you can see her really cool setup, her neon lights in the back, it's such a vibe. I love it so much. And it displays everything that you do, right? The libido doc, all the things libido, which we're getting into today.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I really do this work, Rachel, because I'm so focused on helping people just maintain healthier relationships. And when we look at like the top 5 reasons why couples separate, why people get divorced, usually intimacy and changes in intimacy, lack of intimacy always scores in the top
Mhm.
5. So, of course, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the big top hitters. And so I think it's a very exciting and important topic we're talking about today.
Yeah. And I love that your work really bridges the holistic medicine with sexual wellness. And so for you, yeah, really like get a little bit deeper into that. Like, how did you come about that in the career of libido and intimacy?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my first interest in the sexual health space really began when I was in my very early 20s. And I had vulvar pain that this was before I got into medicine. And so when I went to doctors, they told me everything was normal and ran tests and everything looked great, which was wonderful, except like, why was I having this vulvar pain that was keeping me up at night?
Mhm.
And I was given a book by my roommates at the time that was called Sex for One by Betty Dodson. I imagine you probably know it.
Mhm.
And in this book, Betty talks about a lot of different things. And one of the things she mentioned spoke so deeply to me, which was she was talking about stories of people that had started a self pleasure a practice and they were having pain go away.
Mm.
So this was very interesting to me. I had never gone down this road before. I was just very against how I was raised. And so it was a very big leap to say, hey, I'm going to start self-pleasuring. But I tried it out of desperation one night. And just like Betty mentioned, the pain went away. So that was like my real initial interest into what I now talk a lot about, which is pleasure is not just about desire, but something we require.
Mm.
Then I ended up going into holistic medical school. I have two doctorate degrees, one in naturopathic medicine, a second in acupuncture and oriental medicine. And my career took a very, very different direction, mainly because I got extremely sick. I had Lyme disease, I had mold illness, I had like crazy amnesia. I was forgetting where I lived. And so my career, I built out of that. And I still do own and operate this other business in Lyme disease very successfully. But about 5 years or so after going through a divorce, I really started taking a look at who else I wanted to serve in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and really started feeling like the things I'd been studying for 2 decades, just kind of as a hobby around sex, around relationships, around intimacy, just out of like honestly pure curiosity and pure desire to have healthy relationships. And once I went through the trauma of divorce, I really decided, hey, I was ready to apply these things more deeply to my life and
Mm-hmm.
ready to start speaking out about intimacy because of just knowing what that experience of divorce is like and wanting to help people avoid it as much as possible.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like the divorce was really that transition for you of like, okay, I want to maybe find love again and find relationship again and do it differently this time. And so if I'm wanting that, there's probably other people out there that are wanting the same. And so yeah, bringing these practices and master techniques that you already had from your beginning learnings, bringing it into the space of intimacy, which we know, right? Like sex is a part of our overall health. It's not just, it doesn't have to be necessarily be this thing that's off on like a lonely island, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Now I'm 5 years into this other relationship, and I'm basically helping my partner raise his three kids. I'm in stepmom role. And, it's been very interesting to like combine all that and to move into the period of life where I have children and, I'm helping raise, somebody else's children. But largely my role, like I said, is stepmom role. And so all the challenges that come with that around blending families and integrating and all of that.
Mhm.
And so it's been a really good way of looking and saying, okay, well, how do we do this? How do we actually, keep careers going, take on all these roles, but really still keep like the passion and intimacy alive?
Mhm.
And the more I do, the more I learn, the more I'm excited to share what I'm experiencing with the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, very much for
Yeah.
being on the show and the work that you do. I know we need more of us out there in the world that are having conversations like we are today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I want to roll into it feels weird to almost like say this, but because I think it's a bit of a gray area, but normalizing low desire in monogamy because we know what happens with our hormones, we know how emotions can change and relationships can change over time, especially in those long-term relationships. But that's where I get caught up in the normalizing because it's like maybe it's more common than normal because yes, these things could happen, and if we put in the intention, we put in the work around it, we can sort of get ahead of the game before it gets that like doom and gloom place. Do you agree with that?
Rachel, you're speaking my language. I'm so often like differentiating, right? These two words, normal and common.
Mhm.
And it's really common that we will talk to oftentimes in relationships to our friends and say things like, well, how often are you guys doing it? Like how often, right? And we're looking to say like what we're actually asking for many times in those scenarios is, am I normal? Are my partner and I normal? Right. And we use that. We kind of take surveys sometimes of our friends to assume to get the information of, am I normal or am I not? Versus like what we're actually asking in those questions of, is this common or is this
Mhm.
not?
Mhm.
And really when it comes down to some of the main root causes of low libido, like it's so oftentimes that as we age, there are changes in libido. And so we say, well, this is normal, you're aging, versus, hey, this is common, you're aging.
Mhm.
And when we are experiencing these changes in our sex drive, yes, it's common and left to our own devices. This is like for most people going to happen, right? It's that common. But Is it normal? Does it mean that our health is like when I look at normal, I say, hey, everything in the body and everything in the relationship is largely in balance. And I say everything loosely, right? We're always in this
Mhm.
fluctuating wave. But really I look at normal as the body and the relationship are in balance. And so a low libido, a low sex drive, low desire is a symptom. It's a symptom of the body or the relationship talking and saying, hey, something's out of balance here. And just because it's common that many people have these imbalances doesn't mean the body and the relationship are functioning normally and optimally.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like the body is sending you a message of like, hey, it's like the alarm bells are going off. If you're noticing this, like it's like the trigger to like let's figure it out. Let's get some information. Let's figure out because yeah, it can be so many things, right? You mentioned hormones, stress, inflammation, aging, medication, sleep, right? Like all these things can trigger lower libido. And so it's not, I've had this conversation with so many people, it's not a one size fits all. It's not, oh, this is right, this is here's your magic pill. This is what you need to do. And so for people to, if it is important to them, right? If intimacy is important to you and your partner, there's many areas, many routes to go down for people. What would you say are some of the bigger myths that you've heard about in terms of libido, specifically in those longer term monogamous relationships?
I mean, the top one for sure is that sex has to get worse with the length of a relationship. And this was something that really also was a huge push for me to say, hey, I'm ready to start talking out about this because
Mhm.
that was a big jump initially to be like, I'm going to go on hundreds of podcasts a year and just talk about sex. But one of the other pushes beyond divorce, there's been several, was hearing Richard Bandler, who's the co-founder of a brain retraining program called neuro-linguistic programming. I was listening to a lecture of his, and he was telling a story about when he was going to get married, that people were coming up to him, and I'm paraphrasing, not quoting him exactly here, but it was something like when people were coming up to him and saying, hey, you're going to get married, you better get all the good sex in now because it's going to go
Mhm.
downhill. And his response to that was something along the lines of, you mean I'm going to practice something over and over and over again and get worse at it? So it's like a big
Mhm.
aha moment, hearing that around. Look at anything else we do in life, right? If we want to learn a musical instrument and we practice and practice and practice, we get better at it. If we want to learn a sport, if we want to learn, how to act, whatever it is, so if we practice it, we tend to improve. So then why does this happen? And that's a huge, that was, began a huge curiosity for me. And there's several reasons, but one really important reason is that we get stuck in these sexual scripts, right? So a sexual script is like, well, you kiss me this way, I kiss you back this way, I do this to you, you do this to me, I flip you on your back, we do this position, we do that position, we get to the grand finale and we're done. Left to our own devices, we are creatures of habit. We drive to the grocery store the same route, most of us. We drive to the gym the same route. Like everything we do, usually when we shop at a grocery store, we start here, we work our way through the grocery store in the same way, right? We are creatures of habit. It's one less decision we have to make. So when it's time for making love, oftentimes people go through these same scripts. And if you think about it, when you're like learning something like a new instrument, like a guitar, like the first time you pick up a guitar, maybe you learn a G chord and
Mhm.
it's like, all right, I can play a chord and you make it sound smooth and good and it's exciting. You learn some different rhythms and you add a C chord and a D chord. And like now you can like seriously like jam out. You can play some music. Well, that's kind of like the sexual script, right? So if we, in the beginning, when you learn the D, the G, the C, and you're playing this, it's like very exciting. You're excited to come back to it and it's new. But if 20 years goes by and we haven't advanced and we haven't changed anything around, we haven't added a different rhythm, a different chord, different ways of, experiencing our relationship with this instrument, we're probably going to be pretty bored.
Mhm.
So, same thing to do with sex. It's like we get in this script and we don't think about ways we can add novelty to our relationships to keep them exciting, to
Mhm.
keep our brain guessing, to keep our brain interested. And then, just like anything else, if we did the exact same thing the same way for 20 years, eventually it's just going to get, frankly, a little boring. So, there's many different reasons why this will happen in, in the, as far as in relationships.
Mhm.
Change in brain chemistry is one thing. Our brain operates on a very different set of chemicals in the new relationship energy as compared to the long-term relationships. But the biggest point is like from the standpoint of your question around myth, the biggest point here is like this whole thing around relationships have to have kind of the sex and the passion die out. Well, that's really is a myth. Like they will likely have that happen
Mm.
if we do not intercede, if we do not say, hey, we're putting active energy into keeping this hot, keeping this passion, keeping this alive. So it does require intention and some effort, but it's not by any means like it doesn't have to like be this way just
Mhm.
because we're together for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to add to that, like just the messages that we receive from society, specifically in movies, media and whatnot, or even in songs nowadays, right? In songs that are explicit and about sexuality, it paints this picture that sex just comes so naturally, so organically, and right, we should always be throwing each other up against a wall and ripping off clothes and passionate makeouts, and it's like that might be somebody's real life, right? Like that might be somebody's everyday intimacy experience. But for many of us, it's likely not that, or it's rarely that. And so I think that yeah, society just kind of screws us in that way, and not in a good way, and no pun intended there.
Right.
But and I think it brings up that shame with us of like why is that not happening for me, or what's wrong with us that's it's not playing out that way. And for a lot of couples or women that I'm working with too, it's like that's what they're aspiring to be. But that if they're in a sexless marriage right now, it's like to go from that to that, right? Like it's going to take time. No one teaches us how to have sex. If you think of the sex ed you got in school, it likely wasn't pleasure focused, right? You weren't learning how to orgasm. You weren't learning how to talk to your partner about sex. You were told, right, you're gonna have sex, you're gonna get pregnant, you're gonna get STI, you're gonna die, right? Like just very
Yeah.
fear-based
Fear, shame, fear,
conversation.
shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
exactly. And I think, what you're talking about here around like nobody teaching us is a really, really important point because if you go back to your other comment around like movies and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
so many of these films, so many, whether we're talking like what people are watching in porn or we're just talking about a basic movie, right? A
Mhm.
basic movie you can find on Netflix or whatever, you will see these scenes where it's like, okay, people are ripping off each other's clothes, like you're saying. But the other big thing that you'll see is people that are just reaching the height of their orgasm and pleasure in 2 minutes or less.
Mhm.
And so we're like, it's like so easy to be like, oh my goodness, that's like what it means. That's what it looks like for us to be turned on. And so like, wow, we think it's like that. And another reason why sex can get so much better with longevity, also with intention, is actually taking time to really learn each other's bodies and
Mhm.
learn each other's bodies as we change, right? As we age and things do change in our bodies. So our erogenous zones might feel a little different. They might need different touch and stimulation. So it's a lot about like communicating and really understanding each other and like even basic things like, okay, so for those of you that are just listening visually, also a good reason to go to YouTube and watch the video. Because
Mhm.
right now, what I'm holding up into the camera is a picture of the clitoris. And a lot of people just expect the clitoris, think of it as just this like
Mhm.
nub, right? Just kind of like that head. But it's like also the long legs, these like, it's almost like a wishbone, and the long legs extend. And in so much of the time, we're just focused, even if we are bringing clitoral play in, we're still just focused on that one tiny little piece of the clitoris. And so the more we understand that, wow, we need to engage like the whole vulva. We need to get the labia involved. We need to get the mons pubis involved, that area where there's that mound on top of the clitoris where there is that hair. We need to get that area. We need to get the inner lips. We need to get the space between the lips. And, in doing so, we start activating those clitoral legs,
Mhm.
and so we can begin to play with this. And we can begin to say, yeah, I don't know. I just made balloons show up on the
Oh,
screen, right? It happened. It was
thank
like
you. Thank you,
accidental, but
Apple.
perfect. That was like exactly what needs to happen here because that's what it is, right? It's like getting that excitement of playing with these different areas and then communicating with your partner around like, can we go slower here? And can we go slower for a little longer? And can we kind of try this horizontal movement or this diagonal movement? And we start to learn each other's bodies so intimately.
Hmm.
And once we understand this, we can actually reach heights of pleasure that never, in many ways, are possible in the beginning because we don't have the depths of understanding of our partner's orgasmic potential and of our partner's bodies.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think it's, yeah, opening up that conversation with your partner, unless again, like from that blame or shame, if you are starting to experience low sex drive, or again, yeah, you have a surgery that kind of takes you out of the sex game for a minute. Or I remember right when my husband had his vasectomy, intimacy looked a lot different for us during that time. But that could have very much been like, oh, well, we can't have sex now for a month, but it that wasn't it for us, right? Because we're bringing intention into it. Or men, right? Woman starts going through perimenopause or menopause, right? Your body is changing, your libido, all the things are changing. Um, so, anyways, yeah, for couples to bring this conversation in is like, okay, now it's like in a new and exciting thing. Like now we get to experience this new pathway of pleasure. We get to find now what's going to work for our bodies as we are in them now, and not focusing so much on, yeah, I'm another gray area for me is like, I want us to get back to how it was in the beginning, right? Well, I'm okay, I understand that. And unlikely because your body is not the same, your age is not the same, right? You are not the same person as you were when you entered this relationship. And I hope that for people, right? I hope that you get to grow and change together. And so yeah, for couples to have that shift in the lens of like, okay, let's look at this as a good thing that we now get to explore these new ways together versus shame and blame.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, I think one of the biggest things with that shame and blame too is just remembering that like nobody here is at fault, right? Like if it's not the sex life is not going where somebody wants it to go, oftentimes it's just as simple as we don't know how.
Hmm.
It's like because like you said, like we're not typically taught this stuff in school. And like even this picture of the clitoris that I held up, I have two doctorate degrees in health. And I didn't learn this
Hmm.
in my medical programs, right? So it's like if I'm not learning this in two doctorate medical programs, it's no wonder that people don't know stuff like this. Like I didn't even learn this at that level. So we really have to say, I think it's like that whole thing around it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility,
Hmm.
where it's like, okay, well, let's, relax and let go of any shame, let go of any blame that we have and say, well, of course I didn't know. Of course my partner didn't know. Like this whole thing around he should know, she should know, they should know is just like not really it's not really accurate from a standpoint of I think it's oftentimes like this whole almost belief around like, well, they should just know that this is what I like,
Hmm.
right? And it's just not how life works, is that oftentimes we don't know our own bodies
Hmm.
around what we love and what turns us on. And so how can we expect a partner to know oftentimes if we don't know? And so releasing that level of, oh, right. Like there's no reason for me to hold shame or blame around this because this is just purely where we're at in society around a lack of education around there. 70%, according to surveys, 70% of people say they want to talk to their doctor about sex and they don't,
Hmm.
which to me is just like more of an indicator around like, yeah, nobody's at fault here. It's in many ways our system's at fault for not creating safe and kind and professional, loving ways to teach people how to have these conversations.
Yeah.
But now that people are listening to podcasts like this,
Mhm.
your work, my work, like that's where it starts to become our responsibility to say, okay, well, once we know this, it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to then start taking the steps to actually create the change we want.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a conversation I'm also often having with clients too. It's like your pleasure is your responsibility, is what you were saying. If I'm putting all the responsibility on my partner to know what to do, one, that's a lot of pressure on them, and two, that's me giving away my power of right, like I'm giving this is my pleasure now is in your hands. Like no, like your pleasure is in your hands. And that's when the women I'm working with is like helping them reconnect to their body and helping them have that relationship with their yoni, pussy, vulva, whatever they refer to it as, and yeah, learn it as you were saying inside and out. And I love that you shared the picture of the clitoris. I held up my 3D one during that time here, and I've had this on my desk for years and years and years. And I've had so many people come in and like first they're like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, let me tell you."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have a 3D version. I should get one of those as well. It's a good teaching tool.
So
Yeah.
when passion fades, and I think you'll be able to speak really well to this. When passion fades, what are some of your favorite ways that couples can start to bring some of this excitement back into their relationship?
Yeah, I really look at why passion fades as like three categories, three pillars. So in looking at what can we do, most of the time I see at least one thing and like usually several root causes in all three categories. So we have our physical root category as far as what's going on. So that's basically in the physical root category. It's all of the root causes more of the physical body. So this is where you think of hormones, circulation, stress, neurological imbalances, pelvic floor health, for example.
Mhm.
So I have a really good free quiz for your audience. It's just if you go to libidoquiz.com. So at libidoquiz.com, if you take this quiz, it will tell you some about these physical root causes that could be applied to you. But it'll most importantly, you will get an email with a list related to your quiz answers of the tests you should ask your doctor about. Because oftentimes, conventional medicine, we're just not running in conventional medicine expanded enough tests to really evaluate true, like for some true problems in these areas. So it helps you self advocate. So that's one step you can do is just say, hey, is there something going on? There's an imbalance in my physical body. And for example, like we talk about blood flow so much for men's health
Mhm.
because we need blood to get the penis erect. But for women, we also need blood to go to the genitals. Like the body, the genitals do not feel good to be explored if they're not experiencing engorgement, right?
Mhm.
And that's blood flow. So we need that to happen. So we definitely want to make sure that we're getting the proper testing for that. So that's one. Pillar two is all about personal root causes. So this is where we get into things like what's your body image? What is your genital image? Like so many people have these like feelings also because of movies and porn that their genitals are supposed to look a certain way, and if they're not this way, then sometimes people can have like a resistance of even being touched and explored there because of feeling like they're not fitting within the realm of what sexy genitals should look like. It's
Mhm.
it's really unfortunate, but it can really be reprogrammed. So we want to look at that. We want to look at any shame, and then, of course, we want to start to learn our own bodies. So I do think self pleasure, masturbation is one of our most important tools in the sexual health space. And this was an area I had to work on a lot myself because of my more religious upbringing. And it was very interesting. So I want to speak to this for a moment too,
Mhm.
just as a step for people, because I do know there's sometimes sexual shame that comes around like religious history.
Mhm.
So one area that I really found to help was actually going through and talking to people and looking at the Christian Bible even and realizing, oh, the reason why this is said, even that it's wrong, which I don't believe anymore, but if you do, the reason why it's said that it's wrong is like generally around, hey, this takes away from your relationship with your partner.
Mhm.
Right. And so the idea of why it was taught so much as wrong is like, well, if you do this, then you're not going to be as like available for that, which in the actuality, even from more those that religious lens, it's actually quite the opposite.
Mhm.
Like, there are exceptions where people I have, talked to people that truly are with somebody that is truly like addicted
Mhm.
to masturbation, where there is that exception where it's like, okay, well, they want to masturbate 7 times a day and not have sex with me. So of course there are exceptions to this, but for the majority of people that, have a healthy relationship with this, if we actually approach it, if you're in more of that kind of religious side of things, if you actually approach it from a standpoint of, oh, this is actually me learning more about my body,
Mhm.
me even healing my body. We see self pleasure can heal things like pelvic pain, it can bring more circulation. So it's also like learning about the body, healing the body, so that then we can actually bring more of that into our partnership and use it as a way of even growing closer. So I think just looking in this like pillar around like steps, we got to look around what sort of like underlying shame we might have in any regard and really take steps to repatterning that and looking at our subconscious beliefs, our thoughts around that.
Mhm.
And then in our third pillar, we have the interpersonal pillar. And this is all about how we relate to each other and how we are able to ask for our needs, wants, preferences, and desires, how we're able to receive hearing that from our partner and like not get triggered by it, right? And be able to have good conversations around it. So it's more the third pillar is more like how are we together in this, in this scenario, in these love making scenarios.
Mhm.
And one of the best tools I have for that, I have a lot of tools and I have a whole process that I work with people on this. But one of the best tools is go get my yes, no, maybe checklist. So you can get my yes, no, maybe checklist at mysexdoc.com. And the yes, no, maybe checklist is a really fun date night activity to just go through and have a conversation. You just do this checklist to be like, oh, yeah, I would be interested in bringing that in, or I would be interested in bringing that in. And you're just looking in this for things like, okay, well, what novel things, what fun things we can bring back to the relationship.
Mhm.
But one of the big key things I tell people when I give them something like this is before you actually do the checklist together, at least before you talk about it together, you want to have a conversation to say, well, how are we going to respond to each other if something is surprising to us and we're like, well, I definitely don't want to do that because we have to be very careful here about having our conversation around this and not shaming our partner. So we might say, hey, if I share something I'm interested in and you're not interested in this and it's shocking to you, can you respond by saying, wow, I've never heard this. You say this before. Like, I'm not personally interested in this, but I'm so grateful you trust me with this information. While I might not be interested in it, I want to know a little bit more about why. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about or whatever you need, right? That's just an example.
Mhm.
And so then if I share something and my partner doesn't like it, then they know how to respond to me in a way that doesn't make me shut down because now I've asked. And we want to go in advance because otherwise we can sometimes have like this can backfire on us if we don't have a plan of how to do these
Mhm.
conversations appropriately.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for adding that part in because yeah, when you started with it's a really fun exercise. We use one of those in our practice too, and I'm like, you hope that it's really fun. Sometimes, yeah, if you the when you add it in the part, I'm like, if that part is missing, it can sometimes come off a little jarring to people. But I agree,
Yes.
it is a wonderful, wonderful tool just for getting clarity. Oftentimes, couples right are like, well, we want more, right? We want to spice it up. I'm using air quotes, but we don't know where to begin. That can be a great tool for that. And I work a lot with people on creating what we call sexploration in the relationship. And so it's like carving out these intentional times and intimacy dates, if you want, where you're picking maybe some things from that list and creating kind of combinations, right? If you have the take some of your yeses together, create it into this combination. And the intention of this exploration is not, right, we're trying to both finish, we're trying to get to orgasm, we're trying to finish as quick as possible. It's not that, it's like information gathering. Again, going back to like, let's find new pathways of pleasure, new points of pleasure, ways to access pleasure for both of us. And my husband and I, obviously, I'm in this field, so we talk about sex a lot in our relationship, but we kind of will nerd out after those and be like, okay, I would rate that thing a 10 out of 10, or it could be a 10 if we did this, or that was terrible, 2 out of 10, never again. Like,
Yes.
and yeah, it's just again, it's like keeping play, keeping adventure in the relationship, I think is such a part of the novelty piece to it as well.
Yeah. And we also, we see surveys that, for example, 92% of couples that report having passion that they love in their relationship, 92% of them talk about it. So it's like we do need to do these kind of conversations. And, I teach very similar things in my work too. And it doesn't have to be even like novelty checklists. It can be simple as like, okay, well, let me practice going down on you and I'm going to try going, faster. And I'm going to try doing this with my tongue and I'm going to try doing this with my hands at the same time. And you just like do something and sometimes wait till the end or sometimes even stop in real time and just be like, okay, like, yes, hot, warm, cold,
Mhm.
right? It's like, what are we on a track that's good and we should continue? But
Mhm.
that's how we do keep things just fun and novel. Is like we have to explore around like, what is it like if we try this and just play and we have to begin to talk about it. But another thing I would tell people and like learning how to talk about it that I find to be pretty crucial is it's not uncommon that people will hear something like this and immediately because we are humans and we are oftentimes oriented, most of us more towards away from pain versus towards pleasure as our primary motivator.
Mm.
So it's very common then for people to hear conversations like this and to be like, oh, I've got to tell my partner like this thing that I want to be different and this thing I didn't like. And that oftentimes is another area we can like super backfire in because it's an area, when it comes to sex of all things, it's an area where people naturally, subconsciously have an extra motivator to ego protect. And ego is not a bad thing, right? Ego is all about our survival. But when we ego protect, we can just be more triggered. We can take more
Yeah.
offense to things. So it's so much easier if we hear something that we're not doing right to then jump to a story of, oh my gosh, I'm a bad lover, I'm a bad partner, they don't like this, yada, yada, and it can really backfire. So initially when people are starting to talk about sex, I actually really encourage people to just start talking about what they love
Hmm.
and to really build that love bank up. Like even relationship experts like the Gottmans and the Gottman Institute, when they do their research on where couples, like how many times they say something positive to negative before they run into trouble, what they have found, at least the last time I looked, was that you need to say at least five positive things for one thing that you don't like at a minimum.
Mm.
And that if that ratio gets skewed anymore, that tends to be where relationships start having more problems. And since with sex, there's even more of a heightened desire to ego protect, I feel that, hey, oftentimes maybe we want to be saying like seven, eight, nine things to somebody before we bring that one, thing in. So it's not to say that we don't want to talk about things we don't like. And I do find that once we start developing this as a safe space, an explorative space, like that might not be as important, that specific ratio. But in the beginning, where we're starting to like build up that trust around like, oh yeah, talking about sex is safe and talking about sex is fun and talking about sex, is something that we're doing that's bringing us closer together and it's effective and it's useful. And until we get that frame, I
Hmm.
really do encourage people to think around like much more of like, hey, for every like one thing that we're going to say, that we not want to be different,
Hmm.
maybe we start with like seven, eight things that we love. And of course, if something is like, this is incredibly painful or this is incredibly a problem, then we want to say that ASAP. But if it's more around just like, this thing's not doing it for me, I just don't like it, then maybe we want to build in some more of that good before we start building in any of the things we want to be different.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like setting is as much as you can kind of set ego aside for a minute and approach those conversations with like compassion and curiosity really even with your partner because yeah, it's like it's probably vulnerable for the both of you. I think yeah, vulnerable, right, just the word vulnerability plays such a role in this. And so yeah, if you're on the other end of this conversation as the person is sharing and you're able to hold that space for them and not shame, not judge them, that is only going to make that conversation go further and for you both to feel heard and understood on the other end. And that's it's like if
Exactly.
you can create that safety, that type of safety outside of the bedroom, that's only going to make the stuff inside of the bedroom way hotter and more enjoyable for both of you.
100%. Exactly right.
It's
Yeah.
like if we can't talk about sex without arguing, how are we supposed to have good sex, you know?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's a very, very important foundational skill.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. And that's the last thing I wanted to add here too is like sex is a skill. Sex is something that you can get better at. And so if it is something that you are wanting to get better at, right, there are resources out there, podcasts, books, programs, all sorts of things. I'm not, as you notice, recommending porn here as a resource for that. There are truly professionals out here that are teaching some really good sex skills. And so yeah, as we wrap here, like you're one of those people. You have your podcast, you have the libidodoc.com. If people are looking to work with you or get some of your resources, how do they best connect with you?
Yeah, definitely go get a copy of my book. It's called Want to Want It. You can find it at wanttowantIt.com. And then I mentioned a couple resources already, but another easy to remember link where you'll find a ton of free stuff plus a ton of products at discounts is at if you go to havehotsex.com, you'll find links to those two other freebies that I mentioned, plus other freebies, plus additional products with discounts, that sort of thing. So super easy, wanttowantIt.com, havehotsex.com, and you'll have a lot of great ways of getting started.
Yeah, easy to remember, but we will definitely link it in the show notes for people so it's easy to find.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you
Yeah,
for inviting me here.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm very happy that we had you on the show. And yeah, this was a wonderful conversation today.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you really fucking loved it, make sure to tag me on social media at @TheRachelMain. I'll see you next week.